Hey y'all, I'm Tyrella, and if you're new here, I like to tell true crime stories with a millennial twist. I like to use some adult words and just try to keep it, light and breezy, but also telling the stories, honoring victims, and doing what we can to spread awareness. If you're not new here, welcome back, Hey Cuties. And, let's get into today's case. Today, I'm actually going to cover the first episode of the second season of Worst Roommate Ever on Netflix. And this is a series that we've covered on the podcast before, but we had a lot of requests to talk about the second season. So I wanted to do like a video on it and do a case that we would release to everybody. This one's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. They're all wild. Do you guys remember the first season? Okay, what do you like better? First season, second season? If you're watching on YouTube, let me know in the comments. I'm only on episode 1. I'm trying to actually watch them as I record them, but pretty crazy. This one's called My BFF Tried to Kill Me. And this is season 2, episode 1. And I want to give a hey girl thanks to Beth for writing this one up. And a hey girl thanks to me for requesting it. All right, let's get into it. So this story centers around Rachel Booth and her friendship with Janie Rid. So Rachel Booth was the 6th of 7 children and was always really close with her dad, Richard. And she ended up meeting her first husband when she was pretty young. And according to her dad, he was really opinionated. He always wanted things done his way. He said it was a bad marriage to begin with, and it ended pretty quickly. So after she gets divorced, she ends up moving back in with her parents in Salt Lake City, Utah. And then in 1995, at this point, Rachel is 22 years old. She met Janie Rid, who was at that time, and as they continue to grow, she was 4 years older. So at that time, she would have been 26. She remained 4 years older as the years went on, because I know math. They connected pretty quickly. So Rachel says that Janie was shy. She was really nice. She was really introverted. But Rachel was really outgoing. She liked to go out a lot. They were kind of opposites, but they complemented each other well, it seemed. And Rachel said that she was used to being criticized a lot, and Janie never criticized her. She always felt like she wasn't being judged by Janie, that she was welcomed and that she belonged with Janie, kind of thing. Rachel was ready to move out of her parents' house. Janie was uncomfortable living on her own in her apartment at the time because it had been broken into, so she was a little nervous to be by herself, understandably so. So at this point, they're like, we should move in together. I'm ready to move out. You need a roommate. Let's do it. They'd only known each other a few months at that time, but especially in your early 20s, you meet somebody and then you might room with them. That happens in college. I wouldn't know. I fell at college, so I didn't go back, and I certainly never lived there. But everybody that I know who had, unless you requested your roommate in your dorm, you just got paired up with somebody. And, I definitely know people who, they'd make friends with somebody and then they're like, my lease is up, your lease is up. Let's do this, right? So they decide to move in together. Rachel had never lived alone, and she said that she felt really safe moving in with Janie. According to Rachel, Janie was really good with finances and she handled the bills. So they split, obviously, the rent and the utilities and things like that. But Janie also managed Rachel's finances to the point that Janie was the determining factor as to whether or not Rachel did something, bought something, that kind of thing. And Rachel had her own job. It was not like Janie was supporting them both, but Janie definitely had a say in what Rachel did, what Rachel bought, all of those things. And Rachel said at the time she didn't really have a problem with it because Janie was better with money than she was. So she kind of took that as an opportunity to learn and get better about money on her own. So she seemed to be okay with it, at least at that time. And then Rachel in turn would kind of help Janie get out of her shell. She would be the one to kind of teach her social skills, that kind of stuff, and help her really get out, make friends. They would go to bars together, they would dance, they'd have fun, just what you do in your early 20s, right? Betty Johnson, Rachel's sister, said in Worst Roommate Ever that she did not think that Janie had had a lot of friends growing up, so she seemed to really attach herself to Rachel in a concerning way for Rachel's family and friends, I think, even early on. Like, I don't think that they thought that she was dangerous or anything like that, but they did notice that, like, it seemed like Janie wanted to be just like Rachel. She would dress like her. She would just do things that were like kind of that extra step of like, is this your first rodeo? And like, that seems like you're super attached at this point. Dr. Robin Neinfeld, another one of Rachel's friends, at this time, she's still in medical school. Rachel was a paramedic, and she said that Rachel had always been fun, gregarious, always out and about. Like I said, very social. She dated a lot. She had a good job. She enjoyed her job. Like she was very, very outgoing, always out doing something, all that kind of stuff. But she said that Janie was kind of the yin to Rachel's yang. You know, she was quiet and reserved. Again, you know, they kind of complement each other. But Robin said that she noticed if they were out, like if they were all out together and somebody wanted to talk to Rachel, Janie would get pretty upset and have this like pretty severe air of resentment about her. And she said that even that early on, like when they're all still in their 20s, she felt that Janie was very possessive of Rachel. I mean, that's pretty concerning, right? Like, even if violence doesn't come along with it, that's concerning. Like, a friend is supposed to be somebody who wants you to be your best self, but this is somebody who wants to keep her like all to herself. Janie wants Rachel all to herself. She doesn't want Rachel to have relationships with other people. She doesn't want Rachel to be in a position where Janie is not going to be the most important thing to her anymore. That's concerning. In 1996, Rachel said that she met a guy who she described as dreamy. I mean, it's 1996, so Leo, Brad Pitt, JTT, you know, he probably had the 90s haircut. I'm sure it was great. Anyway, Rachel said that she was like head over heels with this guy, and Janie did not like it at all. Not only did she not like it, now it's one thing to say, I don't think this guy's treating you right. I don't like the way he's treating you. I feel like he's taking advantage of you. Like that kind of stuff. You can certainly voice those things, especially if you're good friends and you trust that person's judgment. But this went in a weird and like aggressive way is how people described it. Rachel said that like something in Janie changed, and it was this dark side that she had not seen before. So Rachel said she and her boyfriend would be like watching a movie together at their house because they lived together. And Janie would just stand at the bottom of the stairs and scream up that the movie was too loud, to turn it down, like screaming. You can walk up the stairs and say, hey, I'm trying to sleep. Could you turn it down a little bit? That's fine. But that's not what she did. She would scream just in a really weird way. So Rachel confronts her about this, and she's like, what's that about? Like, do you have to scream when he's over here? Like, it's really awkward. It's off-putting. Like, come on. And Janie's like, oh my gosh, I'm just protective of you because that guy's a player. I don't want you to get hurt. So I'm just trying to protect you. And Rachel's like, I mean, okay, like if that's what you're trying to do, I guess that's nice, but like, can we do it in a different way? Or I don't know. Robin was like, I thought maybe Janie was in love with her and Rachel just didn't love her back. And so she didn't want her to date anybody else and, you know, whatever. And Rachel says that she kind of started to think that too, just because of how possessive she was with her time, with everything. I mean, if Rachel wasn't giving it all to Janie, it was almost like if she had the audacity to spend time with another person, to date a person, to go out for a drink with another person, to have dinner with another person, you know, to go out on a night that Janie didn't want to go out, there was a problem, right? So she kind of thought, maybe she is in love with me. I don't know. But Rachel is very adamant now that that was never the case. She was never in love with her. She sees that. Then she said Janie would start to get really jealous if Rachel made new friends. Again, to the point, it's not like she would just be like, well, I feel like we haven't hung out in a while and you're hanging out with that person all the time and I don't feel as important to you or whatever. That's not what would happen. Janie would incoherently scream at Rachel in front of new friends that she was making, like would lose her mind on Rachel, screaming again, incoherently calling her names like slut and whore in front of other people just because she was angry that Rachel had other friends. And Rachel said she started to feel like, well, Janie doesn't like me. That's what it is. She just doesn't like me as a person. So she asked her about that. Do you just not like me anymore? Like, have I done something to make you upset with me? And Janie would always say, no, I love, like, no, we're family. I love you. I just don't want to lose you. I'm afraid that you're going to leave me. That's not really how you handle that. And Rachel says now she can look back and see that that was very controlling behavior. But at the time, it worked. And she said she felt like she was a bad friend if she hung out with other people. So she stopped really hanging out with other people. She did that in an effort to make Janie less uncomfortable. So, okay, I won't hang out with other people as much. I will spend most of my time with you. That's kind of how their friendship went for a really long time.
Well, that's just not right.
So now we're going to fast forward to January of 2010. That's 14 years later. Rachel had been a paramedic for 6 years at that point, but then she hurt her back, and it was a pretty bad injury. She kept trying to go back to work, but she kept hurting her back and like making it worse and worse and worse. And per her doctor, she couldn't sit for long periods of time or lift anything heavy. And as a paramedic, you have to lift. There's just no way around it. So she couldn't work as a paramedic anymore. And Rachel says that before having to quit her job, remember, Janie had always managed her finances. And she's like, but I did contribute financially. Like, again, she worked. It's just Janie was kind of calling the shots with what she did with her money. But at this point, she's out of work. And so she wasn't able to contribute financially. And so she felt pretty guilty about it. Rachel was always very active. If you watch the episode of Worst Roommate Ever, I don't think she competed, but she was really big into fitness. She was in very good shape. She's still in great shape, but she was very, very active. And that was really important to her. Like, fitness was a very important part of her life, and she enjoyed it. And obviously she enjoyed having a social life. And she really loved her career. She loved being a paramedic. But it seemed like with this back injury, when it got to the level that it got to after repeated injuries, and then she had to stop all of that. So fitness was gone. She can't go out as much anymore, which she wasn't really going out all that much because of Janie, but and then she can't work as a paramedic, which is what she liked to do. So that happens. She has to stop working. Her whole life is kind of flipped upside down, and then she found out that she was pregnant. And she said that the biological father opted out. That was the phrase that she used. So she was a single mom as well. So Rachel and Janie had been friends for many, many years at this point. But this was the first time that Janie had complete control over Rachel, because now she's also essentially Rachel's livelihood as well. She had no job. She's pregnant. She has that back injury. And Rachel was like, I needed her. And this is also interesting because they've lived together for 14 years at this point. That's a long time for things to just not change. Like, when you're in your early 20s and you move in with a roommate, it's like, okay. And then eventually you either get your own place, or you might get married, or, you change roommates up some. Like, things normally change, but this is a very long time to just, for that to just work for them. They just lived together and it seemed to go well. So once her son Ryder was born, Rachel says that became her everything. She called Ryder, she says, he's magic, which is just so sweet. And she said, he's the best thing I've ever done. So Ryder has autism, and he is, Rachel says, conversationally nonverbal. And she was told by doctors that he most likely wouldn't speak at all. And Rachel said she always loved music. And after hearing that Ryder may never speak, she started singing everything to him, like everything. And she said that because of neuroplasticity, or the nervous system's ability to change its activity in response to intrinsic or extrinsic stimuli by reorganizing its structure, functions, or connections. You knew that's what that was, right? I knew that. I was just checking to see if you knew that.
Of course, I knew that.
She wanted to try a different pathway for speech. I don't know if she talked to a doctor about this and they gave her the idea. Either way, I never would have thought to do something like this. It's, genius. So she started singing everything. And she said it worked. And Ryder's first words were songs. He loved music, and he still does. Because she was a single mom, when Ryder was born, Rachel got a large life insurance policy that stated that whoever had control of Ryder, if something had happened to her, would get the policy for his care. And she listed Janie as the legal guardian for Ryder in her will. And she said that she trusted Janie 100%, but she paid for it later. So after giving birth to Ryder, Rachel suffered a herniated disc from the delivery. She was in a lot of pain, and, she thought it would get better. So she kind of let it go. Once everything kind of works itself out, she thought it would go back to normal, and she tried to go on with her life. But eventually she had to go in and get an MRI, and her doctor told her that she would have to have surgery in order to avoid permanent disability. And this, it almost sounds, because I've talked to some other people about it, and they're like, herniated disc, that sucks, but it's not like you can't work anymore because of it. But I think the way that I'm understanding the way Rachel tells the story is that I think after repeated injuries to the back and letting it go for a while, hoping it would get better and, all that stuff, you can absolutely incur permanent damage because you're affecting the spinal cord. You can lose nerve function. My husband was at risk of that when he herniated 2 discs in the back of his neck. He let it go for a few months thinking it would get better, trying to manage it at home with ice and just taking it easy and getting massages and going to the chiropractor and stuff like that. And had he not gotten the surgery when he did, he might not have had feeling return to his fingers and, that kind of stuff. So, and he lost a lot of strength in that side of his body too, his arm. And he's still gaining that back. And his surgery was in January. His injury was in November last year. So it can be pretty serious. By January of 2015, Rachel and Janie had been friends for 20 years or so. And Rachel had surgery that month, and Janie was there to kind of help her in the day-to-day, right? Rachel had to have pain medication after her surgery. And so Janie was the person in control of that because Rachel was mostly in bed. And so she would make sure that Janie administered her medication so that she, being on all that medication, didn't goof up a dose and stuff like that, double up. But Janie also really stepped in with Ryder's care because Rachel couldn't lift him. She couldn't do a lot to take care of him at that time. And Robin, Rachel's friend, and Rachel's sister too, they said that they were grateful for Janie's help because there was a lot that she just could not do at that time. And with Rachel being a single mother, they were worried that she wouldn't have the help she needed. Her family was hours away, but they were glad that Janie was there to help her with everything. So at this time, Janie was working for a training center that focused on helping Indigenous people have opportunities in life, and she had a pretty flexible schedule. That's how Rachel described it. I don't know her exact job title. At this point, Rachel was on medical disability. So Janie actually enrolled them in a program that paid Janie to help care for Ryder, which she was already doing anyway. And she actually was doing that on top of her regularly paid job. And so at this point, Janie started to do very well financially because she's essentially not just working 2 jobs at the same time, like she's got a morning job and an evening job. She's getting paid overlapping hours. So, because her job was so flexible, she could still take care of Ryder and still be on the clock, but she's also getting paid for taking care of Ryder, So, Rachel said this became a significant part of Janie's income. Eventually, Janie's main focus was just taking care of Ryder. But this is when Rachel kind of started to see that maybe things were not going so well. She said that there was an incident at Ryder's school one time. Rachel said they walk into the school. Janie knows all the other parents. Janie knows all the teachers. Janie knows the principal. And Rachel didn't know all these people and Janie had been the one there, showing up to a lot of the school stuff when Rachel was recovering from her surgery. It kind of reminds me of that show, Shrinking, where the main character, I don't remember any of their names right now, of course, but Jason Segel's character is struggling, and he's got a teenage daughter who I believe's name is Alice. I love this show. I cannot remember. It's been months since I've watched it. Maybe a year. is there going to be a second season? We don't know. I don't know. But the next door neighbor, who I believe her name was Liz in the show, I don't know. I can't remember. But she would go to all the parent-teacher conferences and everything like that because he was not in a place to do that. And at one point, he gets back involved. And so he goes to one of the meetings, but she is there. And at first, he's like, that's fine. She's like, I should leave. And he's like, oh, it's okay. But then she kind of takes over and acts like a parent. And he's like, yeah, you should probably go home. And she's like, yeah, okay. And she leaves and, they make it like a funny thing or whatever. But that's kind of what I imagine with this situation when Rachel's describing it is like Janie started trying to make decisions about Ryder's, all of it, education, where he would be, what he was going to do, all that kind of stuff. And the people at the school thought that she was Ryder's parent. They did not know that Rachel was the parent. And she's like, that's not true. Janie's not his parent. I am. I'm his mother. But Janie didn't correct them. She never corrected them and said, no, this is my roommate's son. I'm helping take care of him, which is really odd. It almost reminds me of he's just not that into you. And she's like, I refer to him as my husband to random people like my dental hygienist who wouldn't know any different, like, no, we don't do that.
Yeah, that's weird.
So after Rachel notices this, now Janie wants to bring Ryder to work with her every day. And Rachel's like, no. And she said that they started fighting over who would get him for the day. And she's like, no. So she's like, I finally tell Janie, he's my child. And the final answer is he's going to stay with me. I appreciate your help, but he's my child. And she said Janie didn't like it, but she didn't have a choice, right? Well, Rachel has to have 7 more surgeries between 2015 and 2018. And around that time, she started to fall quite a bit. And so she hurt her back again, and she would have to have surgery to fix the herniations in her neck. And because she was trying to be responsible with her dosages, Janie is administering all of her medications again at this point. Then on June 20th, 2018, which was a Saturday, Janie took Ryder with her to her office. Rachel went out to check the mail, and she sees a letter addressed to her, and it was from the court. So she opens it, and it informs her that Ryder has been assigned a guardian ad litem for a custody case. And Rachel's like,
what the fuck?
Excuse me? Janie was suing for custody because she notified the courts that she was concerned for Ryder's safety with Rachel. So Rachel reads the letter. She spends a few minutes in shock, I'm sure. She just saw Janie that morning. That morning, Janie said, okay, I'm going to take Ryder to my office. See you later. Have a good day. Like, I'll see you this evening. We live together, right? So Rachel calls Janie, and Janie's like, hello. And she's like, Janie, are you suing me for custody of Ryder? And Janie's like, and then she just hangs up. What did you think she was going to call you about? I mean, I guess she couldn't know which day she was going to get the letter, but don't you think? Aren't you kind of feeling like your stomach's going to fall out of your butt and like you're going to fart all in your pants every time you hear from Rachel until that letter comes? But she's just like, hey girl, what's going on? Like, that's so weird. So Rachel then calls 911 and she says, look, my best friend, my roommate has my child. She won't return him. He's mine. The police call Janie. They call Rachel back and they say, you haven't been served yet, but Janie has also filed a protective order against you. And the officer also said, because that's Janie's house, technically, because Janie's name was on all of it, right? She already lived there. Rachel moved in with her. You have to leave because there's an order of protection now. So you will be in violation of that order of protection if you don't leave, but Janie gets to keep your son for now. Can you imagine? And Rachel said that was the worst day of my life. It will probably always be the worst day of my life. I cannot even imagine. So Rachel leaves because she had to. She stayed in a hotel that her dad helped her get. Remember, she's got not a lot of money right now. She's recovering from a surgery. So Child Protective Services came and met with Janie first. And the story that Janie gave is Rachel was a drug addict. She was addicted to her pain meds. Because of this, she wasn't a safe parent for Ryder. So then CPS calls Rachel and she says, okay, yes, I am on pain medication, but that's because I just had surgery and I've had 7 surgeries in the last 3 years. So I've been prescribed the pain medication. And look, I don't know. I don't know if she was taking more than she was supposed to. I don't know any of that, but she definitely had as far as I know, she wasn't acquiring them illegally. She was having prescription pain meds filled and getting them from a doctor. So I don't know. But Rachel says that within a couple of minutes of talking to CPS on the phone, they realized that Janie had been lying to them. They told her, she didn't say anything about you having surgery. She just said you were taking a bunch of pain medication. She didn't say that you just had a major back surgery. So Rachel said she got Ryder back 10 days later. That had to be excruciating to wait 10 days to get your child back. So during this time, Rachel's mom had passed away. Her dad ends up moving across the country to South Carolina. Because of this, Rachel and Ryder had nowhere to go, so they moved into a family shelter. Rachel speaks very highly of the shelter that they stayed in, but she does say that it was not a good environment for Ryder. He regressed during this time. He wasn't happy. It was just a challenging place for him to be. They were there for 6 weeks. And then out of the blue, Janie calls her and says, "Oh my gosh, can I see Ryder? I really miss him." Blinking gif. Excuse me? But Rachel says Ryder seemed to miss, he really wanted to go home. It's where he was comfortable. He had been doing really well there. So she said, "We can meet at a park and you can visit him and we can talk." So Janie apologized for what she'd done. She told Rachel that she was just in a really dark place and again was thinking that Rachel was going to leave her. So she did what she did because she was afraid to lose them. Okay.
Sure, Jan.
But in that moment when they were talking, Rachel said that Janie seemed like the old Janie. Like it seemed like the person that she knew. And she didn't seem dark anymore. And she knew that Ryder did really well there and she wanted to put him in an environment where he would flourish. So they go back. Rachel knew that she was going to need another surgery. She wasn't going to have anybody to help her with Ryder. She needed Janie. So she said that when they moved back home, Ryder improved immediately. Janie was taking really good care of him. Rachel waited as long as she could before she had her next surgery, just so she could be sure that things were stable, so that something didn't happen while she couldn't take care of herself, if things were still off. Rachel's sister said she was concerned when Rachel told her we're moving back in with Janie, but she said she didn't ask my opinion and I just kind of felt like I needed to stay out of it. She said, I kind of wondered what else she could be capable of doing if she could do that to you and say good morning to you, leave the house as normal, knowing that she's not planning to return her child that, and she's like, but I mean, Rachel's a grown up. It's not my call. So we just supported her. So in April of 2019, Rachel had another back surgery and she said that everything went fairly routine. Janie offered to help her with her care as well as Ryder's. And Rachel said any incisions that she had that she couldn't see or reach herself, Janie would take care of. She would clean them, she would apply ointment, and then she would rebandage them. A few weeks after the surgery, Rachel started having pain in one of the incisions in her back. She said there were a couple times that Janie would rub it and she's like, "Are you rubbing my incision?" And she's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, why? I don't think you're supposed to do that." And she said that she would reply with things that didn't really make any sense, but Rachel didn't think that it was nefarious or malicious. She just thought that's how she was cleaning the wounds or whatever. But it did get to a point where it hurt really bad. So she asked Janie to look at it and she's like, "Is this infected? Sum 41, does this look infected?" And Janie's like, "No, it looks good to me." She's like, "Dang, it really hurts." I don't know where this incision was either, because there's ways you could get mirrors to see every single part of your body, right? Maybe they didn't have mirrors that were long enough for her to see it. I don't know, but she had Janie look at it. Janie said it's fine. So it gets worse. Rachel starts having trouble breathing and she said, "Okay, I need to go in." So when the doctor removed her bandage, she said she could feel him step back and she could feel that he was shocked. She said he was oh great, something's wrong. And he said, "You have a massive infection and it looks like blue cheese coming out of your wound."
Okay, first of all, that's disgusting.
And he said, "I have to call an ambulance to pick you up from here and take you to the hospital because that's how bad it is. You can't wait for a ride. You can't get over there yourself. You are going to the hospital in an ambulance." "You mean to tell me Janie did not see blue cheese coming out of there?" And it was red all around it. Rachel may have even had a fever at this point, but Janie says, nope, everything looks good. So the incision had to be reopened, and it was discovered that she had MRSA. Now, MRSA is a very serious staph infection, but it is normally contracted at the hospital, and so that was the initial assumption by her doctor. You must have picked it up while you were here at the hospital. So she was prescribed vancomycin, and vancomycin is a glycopeptide antibiotic that works by killing bacteria that causes infections, and it's strong. It's a strong medication. Unfortunately for Rachel, though, the medication started attacking her white blood cells, and she started to get really ill. She actually said in her 2-camera interview in Worst Roommate Ever that she could feel the life draining out of her, and she was pretty positive that she was dying. That's so scary. But then she started to improve, and she called her best friend to let her know that I'm gonna live, So Janie's like, yay, you are such a fighter. That's great.
I'm so happy for you.
So while Rachel was recovering, she said that she and Janie would watch true crime shows together, okay? As we all do. They were watching an episode of, I can't remember what it was. It might have been Forensic Files. They did a lot of episodes with succinylcholine in Forensic Files, so I can hear his voice saying that. But anyway, they're watching an episode where a nurse killed her husband with succinylcholine. In case you're not sure, if you haven't seen a billion episodes of Forensic Files, succinylcholine is a depolarizing muscle relaxer that is used with anesthesia, as well as for skeletal muscle relaxation during intubation, mechanical ventilation, and surgical procedures. And that's according to drunkbank.com. Interesting. And Beth actually adds in here, according to a quick Google search, it looks like this is the murder of Steve Ricco by his wife Kimberly. So if anyone wants to hear that full episode, let us know. Hit that request form. But anyway, they're watching this. And so Rachel comments to Janie, well, that was stupid. Why would she use that? That's going to show up in an autopsy. It's not going to be something that could have been a natural death, right? And Janie's like, well, what do you mean? And Rachel's like, well, she should have used insulin, because that occurs naturally in the body, and it wouldn't have been a suspicious death. And if he died in the hospital, it would have been an attended death, and they wouldn't have needed an autopsy at all. And Rachel is like, it was a normal conversation that we would have. We'd watch these things, and, as we all do. I mean, we've all seen the, meme of people using Dennis from It's Always Sunny, but me watching the murder documentary while I'm eating Cheetos or whatever, and the guy leaves his fingerprints on the door, and I'm like, you dumb bitch. We've all done that. Why would you do that? So she's like, we'd had those conversations a million times before. It didn't stick out to me. She's like, but now that I look back, I can see that I was planning my own murder. Oh my God. Talk about somebody using information gained through friendship against you in the worst way. So, on June 9th, 2019, Janie helped Rachel to bed, gives her medication. This has happened many, many times before, right? She's had, 8 or 9 surgeries with Janie's care at this point, maybe more. Rachel lays down to go to sleep. She wakes up in the hospital. She does not know what's going on. So they tell her in the hospital that her blood sugar had dropped to 13. And Rachel wasn't diabetic. She'd never had any diabetic issues. So this was very shocking and confusing. Janie called Betty, Rachel's sister, to let her know that Rachel was in the hospital and that she might not make it. And when Betty heard about Rachel's sugar levels, she was like, do you guys have insulin or something? Because Betty's a nurse, so she knows what she's talking about. And she's like, a normal blood sugar level is from 80 to 110. And according to Betty, Janie did not seem concerned at all for Rachel's well-being. They sat in the waiting room together. She said Janie was just really cold. She didn't seem to care. And she said she really started to suspect that something was up with Janie. It was just weird. And so when Betty talked to Rachel about it, Rachel was like, that's just how she deals with grief. That's how she deals with stuff. It's just, you don't know her like I know her, right? She's just kind of like that. I wouldn't worry about it. She would never do anything to hurt me. Rachel was in the hospital for 48 hours, and in that time, her blood sugar came back. So the doctors said, maybe it was a fluke. I wish I could get paid to guess. Just saying. I don't know. Again, I'm not a doctor, obviously. Once I fell at college, I never went back. But for your blood sugar to drop to 13 and you're like, I don't know, fluke, that's weird. Go home, see if it happens again. She could have died. Like, I mean, and they did run some tests and those all came back normal, but there's something causing that, right? That's not just, I would not feel comfortable with go home, it was probably a fluke. But anyway, so she was sent home on a Sunday. Tuesday morning, she wakes up in the hospital again. Same symptoms. The same thing happened again, and this time she was in the hospital for 8 days. The doctor called several endocrinologists to try to determine a cause, but they could not figure out what was wrong. Then in September of 2019, it happened again. By this time, Rachel's friends thought maybe she was doing it to herself because they couldn't understand what was going on. And Rachel was like, I'm not doing this to myself. And she even made a Facebook post saying that she was afraid that she was going to die at this point. Then on December 12th, 2019, the case got turned upside down. And Steve Cadiz, I'm not sure how to say that, is an FBI special agent, and he got a call at the Salt Lake City office. He happens to be the coordinator for Weapons of Mass Destruction program. Big deal. The WMD of the FBI covers chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive weapons of mass destruction. I could not say that word, mass destruction. I bet you did not think we were going there. To weapons of mass destruction in this case.
What is happening to the world?
So Steve gets this call December 12th, and they want him to investigate somebody who had been trying to purchase Versa on the dark web. Versa is MRSA that is resistant to vancomycin, the drug that they had given Rachel before, which killed the MRSA. So now somebody's trying to buy a staph infection, which, what the dark web? That apparently you can just buy on www.darkweb.com. I don't even know where that is.
That sounds about right.
But it's vancomycin resistant. So somebody knew the vancomycin worked on Rachel, and now they need a stronger bacteria. It's horrific. The lead prosecutor on the case, Michael Gadd, explained that the FBI hosts a joint terrorism task force in Salt Lake City, and he was told they'd received a tip from an undercover FBI agent who was working on the dark web. Don't go on the dark web. There's police on there. And like, you have to get it mailed to you. This is so Dennis Rader. And he's like, can floppy disk be traced? And they're like, of course not. You can tell us whatever. Send us that floppy disk, girl. We can't trace that. He's like, okay, I believe you. Like, mail me the weapon of mass destruction, please. Okay.
You're not very smart, you know.
So this undercover agent received the order for the Versa. According to Steve, in Utah, the criminal statutes specifically say that biological agents that are entering its borders through the mail are considered weapons of mass destruction. I mean, you could put that shit anywhere, right? It's like Frank's hot sauce. Michael says that biological weapons are a whole different animal because they can grow, multiply, and propagate, right? New fear unlocked. Okay. As the investigation was underway, Steve and his colleagues learned that the person attempting to buy this Versa was Janie Rid. Oh my gosh. According to an article written by Monica Mercury in Forbes, Janie had been communicating with the vendor, or unbeknownst to her, undercover agent, from October of 2019 to December of 2019, and she claimed that she was a biology teacher and needed Versa cultures for a school experiment. I'm sorry. What? I don't think your school, your principal is like, listen, teachers, we need to get Versa in here in the lab. We want the students to be able to see what Versa looks like under a microscope. Simply not legal to do. It's kind of a weapon of mass destruction. So if you could just go on the dark web on your own time, under your own name, and on your own dime, risking a lot of things, have a biological weapon mailed to your home and you bring it in yourself. I'm not a school administrator, but I don't think that's the process. I don't know. I could be wrong. So obviously the task force needs to get a bunch of information about this. If you really are a teacher and you're using it, are students going to have access to this where it could be spread? Is it going to be cultured and grown and then introduced into a community? Is just one person going to be dealing with this? How many people are going to have access to it? Like all of these things. They were very, very concerned that it could become widespread. We can't have that. So now they know it's Janie. I almost called her Jamie again. Now they know it's Janie trying to get the Versa. They need to do some digging into her past and all that. Jen, a sergeant with the State Bureau of Investigation who also works for the Joint Terrorism Task Force, learned about the custody dispute between Janie and Rachel. She also learned that Janie was Rachel's main caregiver. And with this information, investigators started to work the theory that maybe Janie wanted to hurt Rachel in order to get custody of her son. So creepy, okay? The end is going to be really creepy. Just wait for it. While this investigation is going on, unbeknownst to both Janie and Rachel decided in December of 2019 she needs to remove Janie as the beneficiary of her will. She said that Janie was again seeming darker to her. She was detached. She was leaving Ryder in potentially dangerous situations. She didn't elaborate on that. I'm not really sure what she means by that, but that's what she said was happening. She had contacted her father at this point to said, if, something happened to me, would you be willing to take care of Ryder? And he was like, yes, of course I would. Rachel let Janie know that she had made this decision, that she was going to remove her from her will as Ryder's caregiver and that she was going to move out. And she said, it's not necessarily forever, but I think that we need space. We need space in order to make this relationship salvageable in the future because things are not okay right now and I'm not feeling safe. And Janie said, okay, I understand, but can you just stay till Christmas? Stay through December the 25th because I really want for you guys to be here at Christmas. So in December, Janie officially purchased the Versa from the dark web, and according to that same article in Forbes, she paid the vendor $300 via Bitcoin. That's not even real. Just, because I don't believe in it,
Do any of you guys know how Bitcoin works?
On December 15th, investigators made plans to deliver fake Versa to the post office box that Janie gave as her shipping address. They sent a receipt with tracking information to her and had an investigative team parked outside of the UPS store watching for her. On the second day of their surveillance, they saw a woman matching Janie Rid's description arrive at the store. She goes in, she gets the package, which contains the fake Versa. She goes to her vehicle. They follow her to her workplace in Salt Lake City, and when they got there, they ask to speak with her at her office. So Steve initially asked her, did you pick up a package at the UPS store today? And he really wanted to know if she would tell him the truth. And she said that she did, but he was sending her coffee beans. And Steve stopped her, and he's like, I don't believe you. I'm giving you another opportunity to tell me the truth. She lied again. And this time she said she ordered a biological for beer making. She's making beer. Versa beer? But anyway, he's like, well, did you buy any of the other stuff to make beer? No, I haven't bought any of that stuff yet. This was just the first step. I've never made this stuff before. I don't know how to make it. I just know that you need a very serious staph infection to get it started. He's like, I obviously don't believe you. What biological did you order? And she's like, I don't know, some kind of staph. I don't know, whatever. She finally says, all right, you got me. I'm not making beer. I'm actually trying to do research for my friend Rachel. So with this, they had enough probable cause. I mean, she admitted to buying a biological staph. Well, not staph, but staph. I guess not violent. You know what I mean? Anyway, she's acting like it's no big deal. It's fucking Versa. So they arrest her for the attempt to possess a weapon of mass destruction. Man, you want to talk about something that can jump to a very serious charge really quickly. Weapon of mass destruction sounds pretty significant. Before they officially arrested her though, she stated, quote, I wasn't meaning to do anything that would be terroristic. Okay. When they asked her if she was planning on using it on Rachel, she said, no, Rachel's my best friend. I love her. I love her like a sister. I would never hurt her. And then she was arrested. On December 18th, Rachel was at home. It was a regular Tuesday. She gets a knock at the door. She, realizes that the people at the door are the FBI, and they tell her they have a search warrant for the house. And they're asking her questions that she was like, I'm not putting together why you're asking me these questions. They were asking her, where do you normally have packages delivered to? Does Janie do science experiments? Does she make beer? Things like that. And she's like, what is this about? I don't understand. And there is audio of this conversation with the FBI agents, and you can hear Rachel vehemently defend Janie, saying she would never intentionally do something illegal. And they continued their search, and Rachel was like, I could tell the agents were trying to avoid telling me what was going on. They weren't giving me any information. They were asking me questions and being very vague. And she said they finally told her that Janie was in jail, but they were trying to be delicate with the information, considering that, like, they have to sit her down and say, your best friend who you've trusted for 20-something years has been trying to murder you. They eventually told her that Janie had attempted to purchase Versa and that the bacteria was worse than MRSA. They told her that Janie had purchased it a week before, but Rachel, she didn't want to believe them. She couldn't believe them, right? She's like, there's no way she would do that. There's absolutely no way she would do that. But they said, look, this isn't the first time she's bought something off the dark web. And then Rachel says, could she have purchased insulin on the dark web? And they're like, eh? And Rachel's like, that's when it hit me. So Rachel explained to the investigators about all those episodes where her glucose levels had dropped to sometimes in the single digits. And she was in the hospital for days. She almost died. And while Rachel was telling them all of that, Steve started thinking of all of the things that Janie purchased, because we knew about the Versa at this point. We did not know that she was buying ketamine, Xanax, and insulin injector pens. So serious sedatives and insulin. So they do the search of the home, and guess what they find? An expended insulin injector pen. The pen had Rachel's DNA on the inside of it, and it had been used on Rachel while she's sleeping, because Janie's giving her medication and she's taking it and she's knocking her out. And that's how she could inject her with the insulin and Rachel wouldn't wake up, because she was hitting her with ketamine or Xanax on top of whatever else she was giving her. Oh my gosh. She had tried to kill Rachel 5 times over the course of a year. 5 times. And every time Rachel did not die. And she could have any one of those times. I mean, that's so scary. And Michael is like, what would have happened if Janie had been successful any of those times, right? Rachel would have died in the hospital. It would have been an attended death. Because of the insulin, they wouldn't have had to do the autopsy, because they kept thinking it was some kind of fluke with her blood sugar. Janie would have gotten custody of Ryder, and she also would have gotten a $500,000 life insurance policy. It's terrifying. So Janie was arrested in December of 2019, and she had 3 charges filed against her. First was aggravated abuse of a vulnerable adult. Second was attempted aggravated abuse of a vulnerable adult. And lastly, attempted acquisition of a biological weapon. In August of 2020, Janie was convicted on all of her charges. And she was convicted on all 3. That's what they said in Worst Roommate Ever. There are articles that will say that she pled guilty, and so they dismissed one of them, So she was convicted of at least some of the charges, but she did enter into a plea deal. Michael, the lead prosecutor, stated that Janie was sentenced to 1 to 20 years in prison. You'll see articles that say 1 to 15 years. It doesn't really matter though, because she was released after serving only 25 months. 25 months. You would think, especially if you've got a charge of possession of weapons of mass destruction. Now you've got the terrorism task force involved. That's some serious shit, don't you think? She gets out after serving a little over 2 years. Rachel said that when she saw Janie in court, it kind of seemed like a stranger sitting there. She didn't recognize that person. She said that Janie seemed broken. And Rachel was like, I wonder if I missed something. Maybe if I'd been a better friend to her, this wouldn't have happened. Maybe I could have helped her, which is really sad because this is not her fault. Rachel and Ryder are both doing well since Janie's arrest. Rachel's unexplained illnesses have stopped. And Rachel said, quote, she didn't ruin my life. She ruined hers. And that's sad. That's very sad. Since Worst Roommate Ever aired, Michael Gadd has said on a podcast that he didn't prosecute as attempted murder because there wasn't enough proof that Janie wanted to kill Rachel. I know that proof in a court of law, and that's obviously what she was going to do with it, are 2 very different things. I understand that. Did she buy the MRSA on the dark web? And then we know she put that into the wound because it got real infected. And then when Rachel asked her to look at it because she was in so much pain, she said, it looks great to me. I mean, she almost died then. Like, do we really not have enough evidence? I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not a prosecutor. I know that proving it in a court of law is much different, but it really feels like we know what she was doing with that. The creepiest part of it all is at the very end of that episode of Worst Roommate Ever, there's a recorded call when Janie's still in prison. And she says to whoever she's talking to, I don't know. She says, quote, "I know what's going to happen. I'm going to end up out of here. I'm going to find a way to get him away from her. He needs to come back to me now." No, you didn't. No, you didn't. No remorse. How did she get out? They have access to her recorded calls. How did she get out? Isn't that enough to be like, no, we're not going to do your parole right now? That's threatening, is it not? I mean, come on. As stated, Janie only served 25 months in prison. She was released in January of 2022 and granted parole, and we don't know where she is. She's not been mandated to mental health treatment. I think we've got some personality disorders here that we need to look at and that she needs to be receiving treatment for. I hope nobody else becomes friends with her. I hope everybody in the world sees this documentary because, like, we don't know where she is. And she's still very young. Like, oh my gosh. So, anyway, that's it. Rachel's doing well. Ryder's doing well. I hope that they are able to stay in a place where she can't find them. I just cannot imagine. They must live, maybe not, I don't know how much Ryder knows, but I'm sure Rachel lives in fear every day, which is really sad. So let me know what you think about this. Have you watched this series yet? And I'll catch you next week. Love you. Bye.